Adelaide, Rockhampton and Albury, I'm coming to your town with my brand new show about UFOs. You would be a fool to miss it. Polls for the next Australian federal election are looking awfully close. Closer than the polls demarcating a parking spot for a small car only. Closer than polls for a pole dancing studio exclusively for midgets. Closer than polls are for what topics I should make videos on that you can vote on if you sign up to my Patreon. Closer than you are right now to clicking off this video because I'm making so many jokes about polls. Which you can stay on, by the way. I promise I won't. We'll start the video, shall we? Closer to the North and South Pole if you're Santa and have Dasher, the fastest reindeer ever. Distance is relative. If you have a joke that is along those lines, please comment below. I'd like to see you do better. But yeah, apparently if an election were held today, it'd most likely result in a minority government. That's a prediction made by our media class. Prematurely reading into polls and making that exact same prediction, I think, every single time since 2010. Actually, since before 2010, it seems that the rule for when there's going to be a hung parliament is any time Labor has a shot at winning since that wokester curtain came in and longhoused all of Australia by preventing us from inheriting base Japanese fascist anime culture, Labor's true legacy. As we all know, the rule in Australian media, almost without exception, is to back the Liberals. Obviously, it gets a little more nuanced than that, and that nuance is, if it looks like Labor even possibly is primed for another term, astroturf the popularity of the independents. Make the argument that you need to keep the bastards honest. Interesting how you never need to keep the bastards honest when those bastards are in, eh? But when those bastards are going to win, it's always, oh, we need stability in these trying times. Also, I think it's a bit of the old, who doesn't love a good horse race, eh? Much funner election night when you don't know if your wife's going to kick you out of the house when she finds out how much money you put on Pauline Hanson gating the speaker's chair on Sportsbet. Everyone can relate to that. Am I right, fellas? Fuck women. Apart from Pauline Hanson, in which case, fuck women. And since I'm in the media too, it's time for me to soak up some cash and views with the horse race of horse races, except the Melbourne Cup, my dream results for the next election. Well, my number one dream is a hung parliament, but not a normal Labor-Liberal hung parliament. I'm talking about an equal split between Labor, Liberal, Greens, One Nation, Katter, Clive Palmer, Teals, with no clear winner in the lower house. So no one can decide who's going to be Prime Minister, so the parties have to be a little more constructive. They have to look for a consensus builder elsewhere. In the Senate. Ralph Babbitt. Or Babette. I honestly don't know how to pronounce his name. The best thing is there's historical precedent for this because after Harold Holt's disappearance, John Gorton assumed the Prime Ministership from the Senate, although he did transition into the lower house soon after, and good luck getting my dream candidate to transition. He's always got something to say about that. I had to chuck in a Babbitt reference because whilst I was writing this, Clive Palmer announced his new political party, Trumpet of Patriots, aimed to create a MAGA movement for Australia, which begs the question, why the fuck wouldn't you just call it MAGA? It is a concerning development that all around the world we're starting to see the election of anthropomorphized Instagram reels and AI slop. Like Babbitt's platform is what you would get if you told ChatGPT to pretend its IQ was 85 and then force it to watch 3 hours of manosphere reels a day. Check this shit out. This was at the top of his Instagram when we looked. You do realize you're one of those people that runs the world, right, Ralph? Is this what they call in the manosphere a flex? I mean, just look at the Trumpet of Patriots logo and website, and then look at Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Maybe they are the right people to take on wasteful spending, because despite both of these things being run by billionaires who spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars to influence elections, you can tell they didn't spend more than $20 on designing this shit. Unlike quote-unquote independent MP Allegra Spender of the Teals, Spender by name, spender by nature. But look at the very elegant website that, how handy is this, boasts that she votes a majority of the time with the Liberals. Which no shade on her for that. Anyone is preferable to a Liberal, and like the rest of the Teals, she's representing the richest cunts in Australia, so she's going to vote in their interests, and she's going to want to advertise that. But can we stop this whole purer than snow shtick? The Teals, who are definitely not their own party. No, they're independents. Independently far more beholden to business interests than the Labor Party. They consistently vote against the interests of workers. They all voted against tightening tax concessions for people with over $3 million in superannuation. They all voted against criminalising wage theft and closing the loopholes businesses use to undercut workers by replacing them with cheap labour hire firms. If you want more info on that, this is a video that we did from a while back. Ha! You thought I was just going to be ragging on people you already disliked. Nah. You shut up and listen. The Teals now want to broaden the definition of small businesses, which would take away rights from countless workers who would all of a sudden be working for a small business and not be subject to the same rights under wage theft and unfair dismissal laws that Labor slogged through. They're also against Labor's electoral donations reforms, making the disingenuous yet amazing, if it was true, argument that
only people that
transparency
will be able to participate in elections will be union members.
I mean, say no more. You've sold me. If that was remotely true, you can watch my videos on those reforms here. You can watch my 4-hour stream where we go through every bullshit talking point that everyone spurts out that comes from the Teals. The Teals' stated reasons for their opposition to these reforms demonstrates their utter hostility to unions and their severe reliance on an elite donor class. But didn't you know, they're the good guys? Apparently, this is why I really resent how Juice Media and other independent media voices are more than happy to put everything Labor does under a microscope, to keep the bastards honest. Yet every Teal gets a pass, no matter how pro-business, how anti-worker they are, by their own record. I mean, look at this line from Juice's latest video.
And many others running against us across Australia to end a political duopoly that's presided over widening inequality, ecological collapse, and utter shit fuckery.
You'll find a link in the video description to a list of not shit candidates.
Okay, vote for these candidates because the duopoly has been presiding over a supposed ecocide and widening inequality. Both abominable lies, factually untrue, but widening inequality, that's why Labor sucks, even though it's not true, but that's why they suck. Let's have a look at the candidates they recommend. Oh, Allegra Spender, Zoe Daniel, Sophie Scamps, Zali Stegel, the whole gang's there. Ah yeah, all the same Teals that refuse to back Labor's reforms that we just talked about that actually address inequality. Right there on their list of not shit independents because they're going to close the inequality gap are the exact candidates that voted against the things that factually close the inequality gap, but they believe climate change exists, and that's why they're better than a party with one of the most ambitious climate goals in the world and is actually accomplishing it. What? Like, don't get me wrong, a tree Tory is better than just a plain old Tory, but it is phenomenal to me that they endlessly give Labor the completely fake, factually wrong title of shit light and then sing the praises, in fact, barrack for objectively shit light candidates. It's unbelievable that their audience is constantly calling the party of unions the Lib Lights, while the Teals, these corporate toadies that are actively advertising to you that they're Lib Light, that's what the colour means. These are the not shit candidates. In fact, their audience will turn around and say, no, don't you get it? The reason the Teals are good is because they're Lib Light. That's awesome now, for some reason. In fact, the Lib Lights should have the presiding say over the Workers' Party for some reason. Like, yeah, they're marginally preferable to the Liberals. Wow, what a high bar. And yeah, they're representing electorates full of cunts, so of course they're going to be expected to be cunts themselves. I don't blame them for that. Product of their environment, yo. But I do blame the trendy new media for trying to convince the public that somehow Labor Minister Chris Bowen, who has been pushing through an unprecedented amount of investment in renewable energy, or Labor Minister Mark Butler, who has just pledged the largest investment in Medicare since its creation, both of whom also happen to vote for Labor's industrial relations reforms, are somehow shit. But Allegra Spender, a backbench independent who hasn't accomplished anything of that magnitude and primarily votes with the Liberals to crush workers' rights, is not shit. I don't think I need to give my thoughts on the Greens again in this video. I've done multiple explainers over the years. Say what you will about them, and I will say a lot, but the Greens aren't genuinely hostile to Labor's pro-worker policies unlike the Teals. They're only hostile to Labor's pro-public housing policies. But essentially, according to popular internet sentiment, the non-shit candidates that are totally independent, even though they're extremely dependent on billionaires, is let's solve the climate crisis so we can get back to union busting, only this time done by more women in colourful pleats. The moral choice. Garbage. Even their most removed inner city point that people have for supporting the Lib Lights of to support the arts. Do they? Are they more pro-arts than this?
I see a bad moon rising. I feel election on the way. I see the major parties fighting. I see it's Independence Day.
I didn't get most of that, but ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Catter, let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom as far as I'm concerned. but I ain't spending any more time on him because in the meantime, every 3 months, a shithead on Reddit comes up with a new flimsy justification for why nutters like that should be on the crossbench because somehow they're bringing common sense to Parliament. Speaking of nutters, let's suss out some non-shit candidates, shall we? Jackie Lambie, she's about as good as it gets on the crossbench. She's sometimes okay. She's a great advocate for veterans. She also voted for half of the closing loopholes bill? Oh, even less shit light than the Teals. But she was also responsible for splitting it in two and kicked up a stink with Senator David Pocock about the right to disconnect, which delayed and fucked up all of that in the middle of the cost of living crisis. And also my other gripe, think of all the good she could have accomplished if she just stayed with Clive Palmer. Instead of advocating for boring shit like banks passing on the interest rate cuts immediately to customers, she could be teaming up with Ralph to solve the cosmic mysteries of international finance. Money is debt, and debt is money. Do you get it? If enough people did, there'd be a revolution but tomorrow morning.
Now think about this. The application of interest.
Interesting. This is why we need real estate agents' minds to take the reins. I probably should end the video with some independents I genuinely like. Andrew Wilkie, MP for Clark, he's a king. First off, unlike the Teals, Lambie or Pocock, he voted for Labor's pro-worker legislation unequivocally, in full, and isn't endlessly whiny and aesthetically displeasing. He just quietly works away with his pet issues of gambling reform, whistleblower protections, helping getting Assange home. Another party that's really grown on me is legalise cannabis. Did you know that in 1914 the UN was going to legalise marijuana, but Henry Ford made a car entirely out of pot, and so Germany invaded Poland to stop it because then there wouldn't be oil for sale? Look, my reasons for supporting the legalised cannabis party obviously go really deep. You're going to have to watch Zeitgeist. Get your facts right. Look, to be honest, I'm someone that doesn't really care about making pot legal or not. There's actually probably more reasons that I'd like to keep it illegal. First off, not keen on putting some of my best friends out of work. I'm also not keen about the non-chemical paranoia from smoking pot diminishing and making it more socially acceptable and less illegal is going to make it less likely that we have an environment conducive to creating the next Lydia Thorpe, another independent where I think the goods outweigh the bad. Keep in mind though, the good is entirely mean value. But look, honestly, legalised cannabis is what you think the Greens party is. They are literally more green than the Greens. They have proven to be extremely cooperative and constructive in Victoria, unlike the Greens whose entire reason for existing is to torpedo progress so that they can tell their constituency, look, there's no progress, we're going to need more votes. New South Wales member of the Legislative Council, Jeremy Buckingham, for instance, I recently had a long sit down with him. Check that out. He and Justin Field have been, without a doubt, the best environmental advocates in New South Wales Parliament. They actually got things done. The Greens did not. The Greens do not. Ever. They just live off their brand and their marketing department. This is why both these MLCs left the Greens in disgust, because they figured out what a con the Greens are. Fiona Patten in Victoria, she's got a brilliant track record in Victorian State Parliament. She's running under the cannabis ticket for federal Senate this time around. She'll be good. But there's something that you'll notice about the good independents. You don't know who they are. Why? Because the word independent is a brand in itself. Any idiot can call themselves independent. The ABC, the Reserve Bank, the Sydney Morning Herald, they're all independent. They're not, but they say they are. They're absolutely beholden to big, powerful interests, and the ones that you do know, like the Teals, Pocock, Pauline Hanson, Ralph Babbitt, they all have sugar daddy billionaires. That's why they twisted themselves into nonsensical knots to oppose donation reforms. One little shortcut to finding out if they truly are shit light is looking at whether they take money from Climate 200. Just like the phrase independent sounds good. Wow, who'd have guessed people with money for a marketing department can make things sound good? In reality, it's a funding body of a bunch of cunts that for whatever reason had a spat with the Liberal Party, like Nepo baby billionaire Simon Holmes Accord, Nepo baby multi-millionaire Malcolm Turnbull's son, the children of the Fairfax Empire. You know why I like the Cannabis Party? Because they refuse to take money from these assholes. Which gets to the main point of the video. Don't fall for the spin. Every election that Labor has ever had a chance of winning since World War II, this same campaign of we need a hung parliament takes place. Seriously, this is a pattern that stretches back to John Curtin. You can read Sally Young's Media Monsters. She's got the receipts. Just because a candidate brands themselves like bespoke bottled water doesn't mean they're not bog water. And just because a party sounds like it could be a single issue whinge fest doesn't mean that they're not good on a multitude of issues. Keeping that in mind, I also hear that the legalised dogfighting party has an amazing tax policy. Like and subscribe.